Some Dubious Premises in Research and Theory on Racial Differences by Marvin Zuckerman, 1990. A brief summary by Notebook LM. Marvin Zuckerman's 1990 article, Some Dubious Premises in Research and Theory on Racial Differences, critically examines the scientific validity of research positing significant biological or evolutionary differences between races. Zuckerman argues that the concept of race itself is arbitrary and ill-defined scientifically, highlighting greater variation within racial groups than between them across various traits like temperament, personality, and genetic markers. He challenges the explanations of group differences in strictly biological evolutionary terms as even more dubious and cautions against selective data interpretation that could serve racist ideologies. The article concludes by emphasizing the social and ethical responsibilities of scientists to maintain objectivity, rigorous methodology, and avoid promoting potentially harmful theories through inappropriate public forums. The arbitrary and questionable nature of race as a scientific construct. Lack of clear definition. Zuckerman asserts that the definition of race is questionable and arbitrary. To the layperson, it seems simple, but to the modern anthropologist, it is not so simple. Single human species. There is only one species of humans, Homo sapiens. Differences used to distinguish populations are relatively recent and represent climatic adaptations or mere peculiarities of relatively isolated breeding populations. Non-correlation of physical features. Observable physical features, skin color, hair type, etc., are often not correlated, and none by themselves could furnish an indisputable guide to the anthropologist's definitions of racial groups. Interracial variation exceeds interracial variation. Significant variation exists within so-called races. For instance, skin color in groups classified as Negroid ranges from black or dark brown to yellowish tan, and there are groups classified as Caucasoid who are darker than certain African groups classified as Negroid. Legal cultural definitions. Racial classifications often depend on legal cultural definitions rather than clear biological ones, e.g., in South Carolina, anyone with L/32 ND degree of black blood was called black regardless of his or her physical appearance. In Brazil, however, anyone with any degree of Caucasian appearance is regarded as white. Population genetics challenges old concepts. The differential distribution of blood types and antigens used by population genetics raises serious questions about the old concepts of race based on phenotypes, as groups with common blood type frequencies may not resemble each other physically, and vice versa. More variation within than between races in temperament, personality, and genetics. Temperament. Zuckerman argues that smaller tribal units fit this definition of an inbreeding group with a specific geographic locus better than do the huge super races with their tremendous range of genetic and cultural diversity. He cites a study by DeVries and Sameroff, 1984, showing significant differences between the tribal groups Kikuyu, Digo, Maasai within the Negroid race on infant rating scales, questioning the validity of generalizing from limited samplings of American or British blacks. Personality. Using data from a cross-cultural study by Barrett and Eysenck, 1984, on the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, EPQ, Zuckerman demonstrates that blacks, as well as whites, can be found at both extremes on this scale. Race seems to be irrelevant to the dimension. He found no grouping of samples by race when comparing countries based on personality patterns. For example, Israelis and Nigerians are quite similar in personality patterns, and Ugandan men resemble those from Hong Kong and the United Kingdom more than they resemble those from Nigeria. Genetic diversity. The major component of genetic diversity is between individuals in the same tribe or nation. It accounts for 84% of the variance. Only 10% is accounted for by racial groupings and 6% by geographical regions. This strong finding supports the idea that racial groups are much more alike than they are different. Critique of biological explanations for crime and antisocial behavior. Environmental influence on criminality. While acknowledging some heritability for adult criminality from twin studies, Zuckerman highlights that juvenile delinquency shows little evidence of heritability. He cites adoption studies showing that the socioeconomic class of the adoptive family was a significant influence on crime in adoptees, and that risk of criminality in their sample was not increased unless both the congenital and postnatal factors were predisposing. No racial differences in diagnosed antisocial personality. A major NIH study, Robbins et al., 1984, found no significant racial differences in diagnoses of antisocial personality in any of the cities, and in 2 of the cities the rates were slightly higher for whites than for blacks. This contrasts sharply with crude crime rate statistics, which are often uncorrected for social class and other variables. Ethical and social responsibilities of scientists in research on race. Defining racism. Zuckerman uses Webster's definition of racism, the assumption that psychocultural traits and capacities are determined by biological race and that races differ decisively from one another, which is usually coupled with a belief in the inherent superiority of a particular race and its right to domination over others. He notes that some researchers aim to establish the racist ideology on a scientific basis, while denying the political beliefs that are associated with it. Questioning the value of certain research topics. While endorsing open scientific investigation, Zuckerman asks, is this an important scientific question, worth the harm it might do in fostering and reinforcing stereotypes that are applied to individuals in the broader society? He argues that generalizations about the innate intelligence or social responsibility of large and genetically diverse segments of the species are open to criticism on the grounds that they serve no important scientific purpose, given the present ambiguities in definition of the independent variable and immense sampling problems. Responsibilities for objectivity and rigor. Scientists have a responsibility to strive for objectivity, to avoid selectivity of data in reviews, to consider the sampling and controls required for tests of hypotheses, to evaluate the adequacy of data sources and methods, and to give more than perfunctory consideration to other hypotheses. These are of even greater importance in socially sensitive areas. Caution with public dissemination. Scientists should publish in scientific journals and consider peer reactions before appearing on talk shows to present one's viewpoint to the general public. Television, with its preference for simplicity and sensation, is not good vehicles for informing the public of complicated scientific issues that lend themselves to distortion by those with political axes to grind. Extra critical scrutiny of racist science. Zuckerman argues for imposing high standards for those interpretations that have such large potential for abuse and social or physical harm, akin to scrutinizing claims from tobacco companies. He stresses the need for scientists to make our disagreements and the reasons for the disagreement quite clear to prevent the public from accepting pronouncements will be accepted by the public as the final word of scientific truth. Conclusion. Zuckerman's article serves as a powerful call for scientific rigor and ethical responsibility in the study of human differences. He meticulously dismantles the notion of race as a meaningful biological category for explaining psychological or behavioral traits, emphasizing the overwhelming evidence for interracial diversity and the social construction of racial definitions. The piece underscores that while all questions might be open to scientific investigation, the potential for harm from poorly conceived or misinterpretive research, especially on race, demands heightened scrutiny, transparent debate, and a cautious approach to public dissemination.